Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Pinson Memorial United Methodist Church. Be thou my vision, Lord of my heart, not way all else to be said that thou art. Thou my best of my day or my night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I am with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou art thy only first in my heart. Great God of heaven, my treasure, my heart. Great God of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joy, oh bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Be thou my vision, Lord of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best of my day or my night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my life.
Good morning, church. It's good to be with you all again today on this another Sunday in January, January 10th, and lots of great things happening for January 10th. Today is our daughter Evan's 18th birthday. Man, time really flies. I always heard that when I was younger and never believed it, but now I do. But so we're empty nesters, of course, this weekend, but we're celebrating Evan's birthday from afar. Just want to say a really quick word about you guys and how amazing y'all are. I challenged you last week to provide some food for the nurses that are overwhelmed in the hospitals and the doctors, and man, you guys came through. I came in on Thursday morning and we had 3 tables full of food to go to 3 different hospitals, and man, I was just overwhelmed with joy and excitement that we could do that, and that's something tangible. Y'all learned that that's my favorite word, of course. That's something tangible that we could do to help the nurses out in our community, and help those, as I keep saying, nurses, but just helping the medical staff, period, as they deal with COVID. I want y'all to know I got my first shot on Friday for the vaccine. So far, it's Sunday morning, and I'm not green. I'm not turning into a zombie, so it must be the real deal. I encourage all of you to go get the vaccine as soon as you can. I'm feeling fine. The shot was a big nothing. Trust me, with all the medical stuff I've had over the last 6 years, that shot was over in about 2 seconds. And then I had to wait 15 minutes. That was the hard part, to make sure it didn't have any reaction. But saying that to say, your pastor has now had the shot and he is fine. So I want you to go out and get that shot so we can get this pandemic over with and we can go back to being the church. As for right now, we do plan to reopen next Sunday. I know that's Martin Luther King Jr. weekend and a lot of people travel, but we're going to be here. I'm going to be here, and I want you all to be here with me if you can. And we're going to social distance. We're still going to do the things the CDC requires us to do. We're going to spray after every service to make sure we're killing this stuff if there's any of it left in the building. But we want to meet together. And we need to meet together, because you know what happens when you stop coming and you stop doing things on a normal basis? You lose that routine. I believe I heard it takes 6 weeks of doing something for it to become a routine. And that's why you have to change your workout every 6 weeks, or your body becomes accustomed to it and it doesn't do any good, especially if you're trying to lose weight, those kind of things. So 6 weeks is the norm, and we've been out 6 weeks, and I'm ready. I'm ready to be with you all, and hopefully this pandemic will lift and we can all get to know each other and go forward and do what God's called us to do here. I want y'all to know everything I've ever been a part of has grown, and I'm looking forward to seeing us grow as a church and pulling people back into this place and fellowship with us. So that being said, I still want to keep talking about our vision for 2021 and a new sermon series I'm doing. And last week we talked about making sure that we had our eyes on Jesus, and we talked about the serpent and the pole and the people and the Israelite people as they were in the desert and being bit by these serpents. And as long as they looked to the serpent on the pole, they were healed. And that's a type and shadow of us looking to Jesus for our healing and those things that we need on a daily basis. Today we're going to change gears a little bit. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 19, and I'm going to read verses 24 through 29. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and towards all the land of the plain, and saw the smoke of the land going up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had settled. Now, there's a lot going on in this passage, and this is a tough passage, and a lot of people would look over it. But in the verses before, and we see the corruption in Sodom and Gomorrah, and we see the evil in the city, and Abraham goes, and Abraham knows that God's called him, but he says, hey, Lot is over there, and that's my brother, and I really want you to save Lot. And so Abraham pleads on Lot's behalf that God would rescue him. And so God sends angels into Sodom and Gomorrah to pull Lot and his family out. And the people were so corrupt there, they were even trying to coerce the angels into sexual relations. And then Lot, trying to be the great guy to rescue them all, he sends his daughters out in the street to appease the people, to offer them. So there's just a lot of worldly corruption. And I want y'all to understand this. Lot was not a Christ follower. Lot was not a follower of God. Lot simply is given favor because of God's relationship with Abraham. See, Lot looked for the ways of the land. And even before this passage that I read, Lot asked God, could he go to the next city he could see? Because Lot was looking with his regular eyes. That city looks attractive. I want to go over there. God, can I go over there? And so God allowed him to go over there. But God also told him as he was leaving, don't look back. Don't look back at Sodom and Gomorrah, because Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm visiting to bring my rain down on them. And it's not going to be pretty, and I don't want you to look back. And so, there's always that one person that's always looking back. When I used to coach track for the YMCA, I had a young man, and that young man was probably the fastest young man I've ever seen. Just ran like a deer. But every time he got in a race, guess what he wanted to do? He wanted to get out there and act like a clown and look around behind him and see who was behind him. And a lot of times he would win the races anyways because he was so fast. But there was one particular year that I took him up to Carrollton, Georgia for the state track meet. And he's in the mile. And he's goofing off, being his normal self. And I'm yelling at him, telling him he needs to go now and quit looking back. He keeps looking back. And the last 5 meters of the race, the kid blows around him on the other side. He's looking over this shoulder The kid comes around this shoulder and beats him. And he was devastated because he would have set a state record. But instead, he's looking over his shoulder and looking to his past. How many of you have ever been in a place where people are making selfies, and that's what God basically says to Lot. He says, hey, no selfies allowed here, Y'all get out of town and go to this next city I've given you permission to go to, but there's no selfies allowed. But how many of you ever been in a place where people have got those dang selfie poles and they're making pictures of themselves and they're clogging up traffic, and you're trying to get around them? I've waited in lines for roller coasters and people were not paying attention to the line moving and had to wait extra 2 or 3 turns to get on a cart because somebody was making a dang selfie, And so God says to Lot, don't make any selfies. When you leave this town, no looking back. No looking back. And there's a lot of things that we can learn just from this little part of the text as we talk about vision. How many of us constantly are looking back? We're looking back the way things used to be. I've done that. The last 6 years of my life have changed drastically. And I'll never be the track star I once was, or I'll never be able to go out and work on the football fields like I used to with kids. And I'll never be able to do a lot of different things. But one thing I've had to learn how to do is focus on what I can do, what I can do today. And so many times, and especially in the church, the church used to do this. The church used to have all this stuff going on. The church used to have this program, and we used to have this program. And we spent a lot of time making selfies of the past, holding that camera up and saying, whoa, man, if we could just go back there. I want you to think for a moment about Lot's wife. Now, Lot, if he definitely wasn't Christian, you can imagine the worldly woman he had married. And she really didn't have any desire to leave Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot goes to his family and says, hey, guys, we're getting out of here because God's going to destroy this place. And so put yourself in Lot's wife's position. You're walking around your house and you don't have much time left and you're packing things and you're looking around, what should I take? What should I leave? And you're reminiscing about the time that you've had there in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the evil doesn't bother you because that's home. And so as she leaves town, and she's heard Lot say, don't turn around whatever you do. And she's thinking in her mind, oh, it won't hurt for me just to look one time. And then what happens? The Bible's pretty clear. The Bible says that she was turned to a pillar of salt. Why in the world, and this is the kind of questions theology school, seminary teaches you to ask, why in the world did God make her turn into a pillar of salt? Y'all ever thought about that? I've given a lot of thought all week long this week, and I actually looked it up and couldn't find anything. I'm going to continue to look it up because I'm going to continue to resolve this issue in my own mind. But from my perspective, salt is used to cure things, right? So she's made into salt, and God is curing that thing that has tormented Lot and his family and needs to be moved away. Also, when you add water and you put salt in an environment, salt disappears. It goes away. So maybe God was taking her and changing her into a pillar of salt, knowing that her evidence of her body would no longer be there for them to come back and pay homage to say, well, this is where my wife passed away. This is where our mom passed away. God was saying, hey, let the past be the past. For us as a church, what is it God's asking us to do? As we kind of recenter our vision for 2021 and recenter the way things are going now. Oh my gosh, this has been such a horrible week. For months we've had politicians saying, hey, you need to attack those patriots. You need to attack the left. We've had fights both sides. And you knew something was going to happen. And it finally did. And it looked awful. It is awful. It was an atrocity for this nation. It was a disgrace. It was a slap in the face for people to behave the way they did. It's been a slap in the face for months for those sitting in those offices to sit up there and think they can make choices to benefit the American people that only benefit themselves. I will say that. And so we've been faced with what could happen this week. Do we want that to happen? No. Do we want change to come? Yes. The only way change is going to come is if we look forward and we say, God, no matter what happens, I want what you want for my country. I want what you want for my community. God, I want what you want for me in my life, and I definitely want it for my family. See, there's things that we could look at with this whole story here of Lot, and so many times in our lives when we're given the decision to go forward and keep looking forward to what God has for us, we get so caught up in the looking at what's been left behind that we miss what's really important. We look at our financial futures, we look at our political freedoms, we look at social freedoms. I mean, I've seen so many people this week post they were leaving Facebook. They've been censoring us for years. It's not any different. I like Facebook because I keep up with all those young people that I've served over the years, and God's brought me into their lives, and I like seeing what's going on with their families, and I like the funny stuff. I will be honest and say the political stuff in recent months has really angered me. Being called a racist has angered me. If you really know me, you know I don't have a racist bone in my body. But the other side of this is that, sometimes we get so caught up in those freedoms that we've had, the political freedoms, the financial things that we base a lot of our lives on those things, and rightfully so. We have to live in this world, and we have to have the finances. We have to feel like we have a voice to be heard, and we want to be accepted socially, and those things are all good. But when they become so much that we stop looking to Christ, and we stop looking at what God would have us to do in the midst of a situation, that's when it becomes a problem. When we've got that selfie stick up and we're constantly making those selfie pictures and saying, oh, I'm so gorgeous. I'm so beautiful. I wish I was as pretty as I used to be, or I wish I had what I used to have. That's when it becomes a problem. And that's when we start to separate ourselves from God. And that's when we start to be just like Lot, looking at what sight is ahead, instead of living by faith and doing those things that God has called us to do, those things that we could see and those things that we can remember, take precedence in our lives. There's so much of this story that it's also a type and shadow of Abraham going and interceding for Lot, saying, God, please save Lot. Jesus did that for us. He interceded on our behalf as he was hung on that cross and killed on that cross. And he said, God, forgive them. I know you love them, and I know you want their best. Forgive them. If that's the kind of past that we want to look to, that's fine, because that's the past that leads us into remembrance that God is always with us. God is always for us. Maybe that's the only time we should look back and remember those things that Christ did for us. Because, see, Christ, there comes a time where we have to choose Christ over political freedoms. There's going to be times in our lives where we need to choose Christ over our financial independence and our financial freedoms that we have. There's going to be times in our lives where we have to not post that thing on Facebook because socially it's going to anger somebody. And also choosing Christ going forward, knowing that we know everything's going to be okay. I worked the polls this week, and one of the things that kept getting me, there were several people who came in, well, this is a Dominion voting machine, and I'm not going to use it because blah, blah, blah. Where'd you see that? Social media. Social media. So we're looking to the past to see what's going on in the future. I want to make sure my vote's counted. I can tell you from working the polls and seeing how those machines work, there's no way to cheat those machines. They're accurate. But getting back to what really the heart of this message is, we should never look back. We should always look forward to what God is doing in our lives. And when we do look back, it's only going to be death and destruction. If we continually look back all the time and say, well, this is what we used to be, this is what we used to do, then we're never going to see those opportunities forward. You know, I truly believe the church is forever changed because of the pandemic. I don't believe the church will ever fully go back to what we had before. We'll have some resemblance of that. But I believe the church is ever changed going forward. And that's probably a good thing, because the church has needed a kick in the behind to say, hey, we need to be looking forward. We need to be more creative. We've gotten caught up in our status quo. We've gotten caught up in, you've got to only sing this kind of song, or God's not in our midst, or we've just gotten so caught up in so many things that are not important. When God says, hey, what is important is me. Can you keep your eyes on me? Can you keep your eyes on the things that I've called you to do? I want everybody to do this. I want you to look right now. Look behind you. That's the last time I want you to look behind you for this year. No more looking back, and no more saying, well, we used to do it this way. Instead, let's say, God, what is it that you're calling us to do going forward? What new land do you have for us as a church? What new opportunities are you going to present to us as a church? What new opportunities are you going to present to me as a Christ follower? That's what God wants in our lives. He wants to move mightily in us. Next week, your homework is to read Luke chapter 17. And we're going to continue to talk about vision and God's vision for us and where we're going and what we're going to do going forward. And we're going to be God's people, and we're going to stop looking back, and we're going to say, God, what is it next? What is that next thing you've asked me to do? You know, when I was a kid, my great-grandfather meant a lot to me in my life. And I'll never forget, I had a really, really, really bad day. And my dad came home from work, and my mom told him I'd had a bad day, and I was upset. I've been crying a little bit, you know, and my dad came in my room, and he said, let's go see grandmother and granddaddy. And so we rode down to my grandparents, and I don't know, my granddad always had this way about him of making you laugh. And I start walking up on the porch, and he's doing this. He had his hands like this. He's looking at me like that. And I walk up on the porch, and I said, Granddaddy, what in the world are you doing? He said, I want to teach you something, son. I said, okay. He said, and made me do my hands like this. And he said, these are magic glasses. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, this is how you wear them. You take your hands like this, and you flip your hands over, and you got a pair of magic glasses. And he said, when you put those glasses on, the only thing you can see is what's in front of you. And he said, that's what I want you to know. He said, God's got great plans for you, and God's going to use you mightily. He said, you got to quit looking at your surroundings and focus on God. So I don't have any way of making crazy glasses for y'all, but I want you to practice this. Take those hands and make those glasses and put them on. God, what is it you have for me? I don't want to look back. I don't want to be caught making selfies. I want to know what you have for me in my life. And that's what God's calling us to do. God's calling us to go forward in Him. God's going to do amazing things, but we've got to change the way we see. This is the Word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.